As someone who has lived his whole life on the Gulf Coast, I can tell you just how important this bill is. For many people who live on our nation's coast, this bill is about a way of life. This bill is for our nation's commercial fishermen who depend upon a reliable fishing stock in order to make a living. This bill is also for our nation's charter boat fleets, which are an important source for tourism. That means jobs, Mr. Speaker. And all too often, people in this town and government scientists seem not to care about that. Just as importantly, this bill is for our recreational fishermen and everyday anglers who just enjoy spending time on the waters. For my family, this is a lifelong tradition. I remember fishing with my dad on the Gulf of Mexico. I treasure opportunities to fish with my 4 children. And as a new grandfather, I look forward to fishing with my grandson. This is a good bill. And as a former member of the Committee of Jurisdiction, the Natural Resources Committee, I can tell you that a great amount of time and effort has gone into this bill. This process started over 2 years ago, and there was a lot of work to bring all parties together to get a bill that everyone can agree on. Unfortunately, as happens far too often here in Washington, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have decided to make this into a partisan fight. President Obama has said he will veto this bill. All this despite real efforts to work together across the aisle to get a bill that works for everyone. Now, I want to briefly talk about the idea of science that the President and my colleagues on the other side claim the bill undermines. All too often here in D.C., what passes for science is just political ideology dressed up with some technical language with no real basis in observable data. I don't know if the gentleman from Colorado has ever been fishing for red snapper in the Gulf Coast. If he hasn't, I invite him to do so. But I can tell you that there are more red snapper there than there have ever been before. Despite that good news, NOAA and the federal government is consistently undercounting the number of fish in the Gulf of Mexico. Here's the craziest part of all. NOAA is not sampling for red snapper on reefs, despite the fact that the red snapper is a reef fish. That's simply absurd. If you look for red snapper on somewhere other than the reefs, you're not going to find them because they live on reefs. Now, NOAA is also overestimating the number of red snapper caught each year. For example, last year the federal government estimated that 1,041,000 pounds of red snapper were caught off the coast of Alabama, where I'm from. The Alabama reporting system, which is run by the state, only estimated a catch of 418,000 pounds. That's a remarkable disparity. So what has happened is a very dangerous combination of NOAA underestimating how many fish are actually caught out there and overestimating the number of fish caught each year. This has resulted in a dramatically shortened season for our red snapper fishermen. Last year's red snapper season was only 9 days. This year it's been increased to 10 days. That is simply unacceptable. I support science-based management. The committee supports science-based management. But I don't support, and the committee doesn't support, flawed science-based management. And this House should neither. So that's why I get so frustrated when I hear my colleagues say that this bill undermines good science. Come tell that to my fishermen on the Gulf Coast. Come tell that to the marine scientists on the Gulf Coast who have done extensive scientific research on this. This bill is important because it includes real reforms that are designed to get some better science for all of our fisheries, not only as it relates to red snapper, but as it relates to the fishery all around the United States of America. Why don't we encourage stronger partnerships with local colleges and universities, which have done great work in the past? I do want to touch on that red snapper issue a little more because it's so important to the people I represent, and it's very important to the debate on this bill. This bill includes 3 important reforms that I and local scientists and stakeholders believe will get us a real red snapper season. Number 1, it repeals the inflexible quotas that have been in place up until this point. Number 2, it creates jurisdictional parity by expanding state waters out to 9 nautical miles, Gulf-wide. Number 3, it shifts the stock assessment and data collection responsibilities from the federal government and giving those responsibilities to the Gulf states so we can get some real science, not flawed science. Far too often, people in Washington think we know best. People in Washington think we have all the answers. This is an issue where that simply is not the case. This bill empowers our nation's fishing communities and gives them the flexibility they need. So regardless of whether or not you go fishing, this issue should matter to all Americans because this issue is about freedom and limiting the role of the federal government in areas where it just doesn't belong.